Imagine this. You're at a poker table staring down a mountain of chips. Your heart races as you push your last stack into the middle, certain your opponent is bluffing. But then they reveal the nuts. You have been played. But here's the twist. They were not even trying to deceive you. Welcome to the cruelest deception in poker. New players watch movies, sees hero bluffing with deuce-7 offsuit, and think that's the path to glory.
Jesus, what a bluff!
No, that is just plain historic, DJ. You did it.
But here's the reality. Poker isn't about lying. It's about capitalizing on the lies. In poker, few things are more misleading than the very idea of deception. Many people mistake deception for secrecy, but they are not the same. Secrecy is fundamental to poker. I mean, if you saw the player's hole cards, well, there's no point in playing, poker would not exist. But it's not the same as deception. Deception is about deliberately misleading your opponents using unconventional plays to make them misjudge the situation and make mistakes. You check raise, deception. Slow play a monster, deception. Bluff all in with deuce-7, deception. Play weak hands occasionally so others see who has lose, deception. In poker, it's not just about keeping secrets, it's about crafting illusions. Sure, skilled players rely on deception frequently, but why does that matter? Isn't that something everyone already knows? Probably, but here's the important takeaway. Deception in poker isn't usually a direct source of profit. Instead, think of it like a business investment, much like advertising. It's often something you have to do rather than something that immediately boosts your earnings. There are times when deception leads to instant gains, such as checking to induce a bet from an overly aggressive opponent. However, in many cases, deception is about balancing your strategy to prevent skilled opponents from spotting patterns in your play. In these instances, deception acts more as a cost than a direct benefit. Now here's the lesson pros don't want you to hear. More often than not, the most profitable move in poker is the obvious, straightforward one. That's why it's the recommended play. Is it boring? Maybe. But math does not care about drama. Whenever you deviate from the most straightforward play, you need a solid reason, and deception alone isn't enough.
Antonio can't really like the flop raise, but the likelihood that Phil hasn't beat on that board is pretty slim.
Many players at low stakes often find it tempting to slow play their strong hands like nut flushes or better when they flop them. The rationale behind this is understandable. By not betting aggressively, they hope to let opponents catch up and potentially build a bigger pot. However, this strategy has significant drawbacks. Firstly, it fails to fully capitalize on the value of strong hands by not aggressively building large pots. Secondly, it can make your play too predictable. When you consistently bet strong draws or top pair after raising pre-flop, but slow play your biggest hands, you risk becoming someone who bets aggressively with weaker hands but is passive with the strongest holdings. Deception here is a luxury tax, only worth paying if the future profit outweighs the risk.
This son of bitch all night, chick, he trapped me!
Here's the key insight. Your goal in poker should be to play as straightforwardly as possible. That's where the real money is. By consistently making the most logical decisions based on a complete understanding of the situation. For example, checking against an opponent who bluffs too often is technically deceptive, but is also the best logical move. Bluffing against a player who folds too much is deceptive as well, but it's still the most profitable play. However, many deceptive strategies come at a cost because they aren't the highest value decisions in the moment. Instead, they aim to influence your opponent's future actions to extract more money later.
You didn't have pocket kings?
I didn't have any kings, except the one in the middle.
You had 2 pair?
One pair. The 9s in the middle.
Interestingly, playing the most obvious way can sometimes be deceptive in itself. But wait, why does this work? Because predictability is a superpower. If you have conditioned opponents to think you are a loose cannon, suddenly playing straightforward becomes its own deception. They are so busy waiting for your trap, they walk face first into your value bets. That's the cruelest trick of all. In draw poker, a common tactic with 3 of a kind was to draw 1 card. This gave the impression that you were chasing either a straight or flush or that you had 2 pair. But the real sharks, they draw 2 cards. The obvious, honest move. Why? Because opponent thought no one's dumb enough to telegraph trips. He must have a pair. So they'd call and drown in regret. The cruelty, well, the sharks weren't even bluffing. He played it straight and profitably. Because when you have gaslit the table into expecting chaos, simplicity becomes a weapon. No matter the variant of poker, that should always be your goal. To maximize profits by making the right decisions while letting deception take care of itself. Use deception when you are confident it will make you appear a loser and encourage opponents to give you extra calls in the future. Use deception by slow playing strong hands if you know a particular opponent will bet into you, allowing you to extract more value with a raise. And by all means, use deception through unconventional plays, table talk, or even outright misdirection.
Show the Jack 5.
I won't, I'll show the Jack 9. Whee! Here we go, here we go. You see, no ace can't call, here we go. Why I make this move? I have Jack of Heart, this big card, Jack of Heart. You see, big heart. Heart comes on the turn.
Bluffing is an art, but art without strategy is just graffiti. Only deceive when the profit is screaming louder than your ego. But don't use deception just for the sake of it. Not because it's been a while since your last tricky move. Not because you are feeling creative. Not because you want to show off. And definitely not just for the thrill of it. Deception should always have a clear and profitable purpose, nothing less. One major issue with deception in poker is that players tend to remember the times it worked
Vanessa, wow, what a sick bluff.
while overlooking when it didn't.
Yeah, I'll fold this one. You got it.
The truth is, measuring the actual value of deception is tricky. You are often just making educated guesses. Take bluffing for example. It's inherently deceptive, but assessing its effectiveness isn't always straightforward. If you bet with a weak hand and your opponent folds, you might pat yourself on the back for a well-executed bluff. But what if you would have won the hand anyway by simply checking? If you don't account for those scenarios, you'll end up with a misleading view of how profitable your deception really is. The same applies to any deceptive play in poker. It's not just difficult to fool your opponents profitably. It's easy to fool yourself about whether deception is actually working. Remember this, every chip you save by avoiding unnecessary lies is a chip earned. And in poker, patience isn't just a virtue, it's a paycheck.